What is up, guys? We are here with the one and only Vish Burra. He has been involved in a lot of different projects in the political world, and so we're just going to dive in and ask him. So we know you came up about in the New York area, being a Republican in New York. So can you tell us like a little bit about that story and how kind of like that progressed, where you started on that, and where you got to being involved in Washington?
Yeah. So actually, I voted for Obama in 2012.
Wow.
I was an independent. Like I was registered as an independent, but I was a nihilist. I never really believed that like any one person can like bring change to Washington, right? That your president is selected, not elected. Like I was one of those guys that didn't believe anybody could do anything. And then I had some experiences, obviously, coming up in the street and all that, and trying to build myself back from that as well. I had experiences in the software industry, and a lot of those experiences kind of like compounded and layered on. And then Donald Trump came, and he just like kind of like blew the lid off the whole thing and made me realize like, yo, this is actually what's going on based on the things that I've seen. And like this guy's speaking truth to power. And then add that with Bernie getting the nomination stolen from him in 2016. I was like, there's no way I'm going to reward Hillary Clinton with a vote.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, hey, I'm just trying to talk to my friends in New York, who I grew up with. I'm like, hey, look, we should vote for Donald Trump because, like, we can't reward Hillary Clinton with a vote for committing fraud.
Yeah.
And they all turned on me. The first thing, they were like, hey, Vish, what are you, a racist? And I'm like, guy, have you looked at me recently? So that, at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm going to be gung-ho about supporting Trump. I did that. And then that's when the world started tearing itself apart after he won, I decided I needed to do more than just vote. And that's when I got involved with the New York Young Republicans, met Gavin Wax. We took that over to become, Gavin became the president, I became the vice president, and that's kind of how we started building that institution from 60 members at that time.
60
to 1,200 members now in 5 years, basically.
That's like thousands of a percent increased.
That's right.
That's a lot of people.
It is an incredible growth rate, 1,000%, over thousands of percentage points. But really, it kind of shows that how much energy is actually out there. Nobody would think that New York City is able to muster up this much MAGA energy. So imagine what other big cities can also do if you had a couple people devote their time, consistently show up, build a team that's able to organize, groups, parties, crowds, rallies, right? That's how you grow. You start from something small and you build it into an avalanche.
I want to go back real quick to a comment you just made about you started talking to your friends about how no, Hillary Clinton's not, this is not who we should be voting for.
Yeah.
When you say you started talking to your friends, you're just like, was it just your first circle of friends, or was it like, you were going on social media, or was just like
things? It was all of those things. So I was posting on social media.
Okay.
I was like, hey, you can't steal an election and expect me to vote for you.
This is like being a force multiplier.
Yes, that's right. That's it. So I'm on social media. I'm pushing it. I'm talking to my friends that I grew up with in person.
And you say stolen, you're talking about like the primary, about like taking it from Bernie?
Right, that's right. When the DNC kind of colluded with DNC colluded with Hillary Clinton to steal the nomination from Bernie. That's what that turned me off. There was no way logically I was going to vote for that. Yeah. So now it wasn't even necessarily about ideology at that point. It's just kind of simple psychology. Like you don't reward bad behavior with votes and positive reinforcement.
That's brilliant. And so when you got involved with the New York Metropolitan Republican Club and Gavin Wax, Young Republican Club, what was kind of like the first couple things you did to kind of be like, okay, this is what we're going, our strategy is how we're going to grow this thing? Right.
So I think the first thing we did was we modernized all the branding, right? Actually, let me take a step back. The first thing that we did was build the team. Okay. Right? The Avengers, right? It's like, you got to build the team. So obviously me and Gavin at the top, I should say Gavin and I at the top.
Right.
And then, we go and get a treasurer. We go and get somebody who's good at taking notes and organizing bookkeeping and all that. But then we also go get somebody who's really good at taking photos for, communications, right? Somebody who's really adept at social media and knows how to grow Instagram pages and all that. Another thing we did was we went and got a graphic designer, somebody who can make all our content that we're going to promote. We're going to be throwing events. We also got an event organizer, right? And so and all these people are volunteers, by the way.
Wow.
Right? And so we got all these volunteers together. We give them each a board position for their role, right? So whoever's handling social media and the communications, you're the communications chairman or chairwoman.
Sure.
If you're doing all the events, then you're the events chairwoman, right, or chairman, right? And so we start giving out these roles, building this team, and now we have 30 board members, each handling a little, one's campaign. Now we have a campaigns chairman and all that.
Everybody had skin in the game.
Everyone had skin in the game and a position, right?
Sure.
And so that was the first step. Then there was also the step of modernizing actually putting into play, modernizing the branding, being more consistent with the events, bringing in speakers with big names, right? Because every speaker that you bring in, they have their own audience locally. And so when you bring that big speaker in, then you attract his audience in the area, and then they find out there's a club, and then they're like, you know what, I'll go to the next event with this club, and then there's a new speaker that they've never heard of, but they're attending the club events. They're not there to see whoever they were a fan of. You see that conversion, how it happens. I take a Steve Bannon fan member who's never heard of the club, but comes to the club, and now he's a fan of the club. Right, and now
my story.
Yeah, and now you come to everything the club does, right? And so that's the conversion process that happens where we're letting people know we exist. We're organizing twice every month. Wow. And here's the place, right? And then we also, in 2021, we upgraded that by getting a clubhouse. And so now
I've been there.
Yeah, and so now we have a physical location that we can call our own and not have to depend on other people. And so that's how we kind of built out the initial stages of the New York Young Republican Club.
How quick was it from when you started? You got this board put together that you kind of started seeing like some traction with people coming in.
Honestly, it was immediate.
Yeah.
We the very first event we did, we turned out 150 people, and then the next event, it was the baseline ended up being about 100 people every event. Without a problem.
That's awesome.
And then that's when we started growing. I think Ann Coulter a couple months after that.
Yeah, that's a big name.
We had 400 people show up to that, right? And this is at a time when our club member rolls is only 200.
Yeah.
Right? And now we got 400 people in the room, right? And so that's how we started building, and the sort of pièce de résistance to that was this past December.
I was about to bring this up. You could see the fruits of their work and where you were from then, when he's describing 60 members to today. Yeah. I mean, you had Trump come in there. You had the Cipriani, you were downtown.
Cipriani Wall Street, largest freestanding ballroom in New York City. It was actually the location where Hillary Clinton called Trump supporters a basket of deplorables. And so now the
deplorables descend.
The deplorables descend on Cipriani Wall Street, 1,000 deep, black tie, right? Yeah. With Trump, rolling in Trump, in his home in New York City, basically promising from day one that Donald Trump is going to save Gotham, right?
Yeah, which needs to be saved.
Exactly.
I mean,
my dear home that I hope to see saved.
I'm from New Jersey.
Yeah.
I live in North Jersey.
Yeah.
New York is the city. We call it the city for us, right? And we're pretty much a suburb of New York City. And I see it. I commute. I work there, and I commute in there, and I see it. I see it from what it was before 2020 into what it is now. And it is heartbreaking to see what's happened to the city and like what can happen, where can it come back? And just who knows what it can be like. But and I want to speak to that too, but I just think it's just remarkable. I think to just take a step back and reflect. In 4 years or 5 years, was it?
5 years.
5 years, you went from 60 members
to 1,200 members, and
at being Cipriani with Donald Trump.
Right, and then like I said, 1,000 people showed up for that event, right, with Donald Trump, Cipriani Wall Street. I mean, each ticket's about $700-800. I mean, people, it's not. You're not just, everyone's there with skin in the game, and they're just to see Trump, right? These weren't donors. These weren't. They were just activists, people who were in New York, young, and want to see the MAGA movement grow.
So, it is remarkable to see how that whole story progressed. And I don't know if people know this about. I'm a Vish Burra fan, very big, because I'm a War Room. Dude, you're. I'm so happy. This is really cool to be able to interview. He was a producer for Steve Bannon's War Room,
Yes.
Pandemic, one of probably the most influential podcasts in politics in the country. And so you were there during the pandemic time, or were you there during impeachment too?
Yeah, so I first joined December 2019.
December 2019.
That was War Room impeachment still, and then it converted to War Room pandemic, and that's, I was basically quarantined with Steve all through 2020.
That's incredible. That's a story in itself. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I let him to say that. How did you go from? How did you get involved and become the producer for Steve Bannon's War Room?
Well, Steve was actually the very first gala we did when we took over the New York Young Republicans. Okay. Steve was the keynote speaker at that. And so he walks into this room, 350, 400 young people I think it was at the Yale Club at the time.
Right, okay.
And he walks in and it's like, what? There's these young people that are MAGA paying $400 a plate at the Yale Club in Manhattan, screaming Trump. Who put this together? And that's when someone was like, oh, it's Gavin Wax and Vish Burra. And I had already met Steve a couple times at this point because I had a secret mentor who was already introducing me to Steve. I had told him Steve is my most favorite character in the right-wing universe.
He's a right? For sure, yeah.
Right? And so he was kind of warming it up. I had worked as a production assistant on a couple of Steve's movies before that.
Really?
Yeah,
wow,
Trump, cool. Trump at War, and I think one other movie I also helped him out on. But then that when the time came, War impeachment came, they said, hey, we're looking for a producer. Can somebody help us out? Do you know anyone good? My secret mentor said Vish Burra's the guy. And I got the recommendation and said, do you want, and they asked me like, hey, do you want to produce War Room impeachment?
Wow.
And I said, yes. And I threw my clothes in my car and was on my way to DC the next day.
That is incredible. I would say, as a War Room fan, it would be a dream to work on the War Room. I would love, and I got to be on it today. I was one of the first people that it was awesome. It was so cool. This is the benefits of coming to CPAC and you meeting people, right? This is where you get to do that.
I started out at CPAC too. People don't realize that one of my first coming out sort of scenes was 2018 CPAC. I just showed up, kind of dressed like this. Right, and I look different, right? I don't look like your typical Republican. Yeah. And so all these media people are like, can we interview you? Can we interview?
What's a black guy doing?
What's a brown guy doing? And then
aren't you guys all racist?
Yeah, and then people notice, right? Just like this, where we're doing interviews and stuff. People already think I'm famous, right? And they're like, well, who are you? And I'm like, I'm actually a nobody. I'm just a brown guy in a MAGA hat. But all right, that was also kind of how I got into the scene and then started throwing parties at CPAC, right? That was
event planning. You had to throw parties and grow a movement. That's a pretty cool gig.
That's always what politics has been, right?
Right.
Your ability,
mm-hmm.
Your ability to organize humans, human capital, people, real people in a place, get them to show up at a certain time and do something, right? That is what voting is, that right?
Absolutely.
And so that's what political organizing is. So the ability to throw a party and your ability to politically organize is actually very inextricably linked.
It's essential, and one of probably the most essential ingredient or actions of politics, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let me ask you this, because I'm really interested to hear, what was it like behind the scenes? I mean, you had Jack Maxey, you had Jason Miller, you had Raheem Kassam, you had all these guys. All of a sudden, I will tell you, it was divine providence, in my opinion, that Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats decided to impeach Donald Trump on a Ukraine call. Because if it wasn't for that, I would have never met Steve Bannon. Because I would have never come across Steve Bannon, because I'm like, what's going to happen with this impeachment? I need to get some more information. I heard that this guy was having a podcast. I was like, all right, I'm going to check him out and see what he's saying. And he had a really insightful information and goes to see what is the real issue, the fundamental issue of what's going on in this process of the impeachment. And then all of a sudden, it's just Steve starts calling, he's like, there's this flu going on in China. They're canceling Chinese New Year. They never cancel Chinese New Year. I know China like the back. And I'm like, why is he doing this? And I mean, he was the first person to go over from impeach. He would to report on the pandemic, and he doesn't get a lot of credit for that. And everybody, the mainstream media tries to take credit for being huge,
right.
and covering a pandemic. What was the decision making like? What was it behind the scenes in the war room when you went from impeachment to pandemic?
Yeah, well, so I guess the real superpower that Steve has that you have to understand is his ability to see over the horizon, see 4 to 6 months ahead, maybe even a year ahead. What is going to be the thing? So he was, we were, I think, behind the scenes story is interesting.
Yeah.
In the last 2 weeks of December 2019, Jack Maxey is our engine room guy. He's our main researcher, and what he's doing, he's going and looking through Weibo chats of taxi drivers in China who are talking about this crazy flu going around, people like dropping dead and all that, and the government's acting funky, and that they're shutting shit down and all that. And so he brings that to Steve. Steve then takes that, goes to his sources, trying to figure out like what's going on. His sources come back and say this thing is crazy, and we've never seen anything like it, and we're expecting major sort of events to take place because of this.
Yeah.
And then I think at that point, I think it's like January 15th.
January 15th, yeah. When the World Health Organization, you have it on the timeline. Yeah. There's a timeline. They said there's no human-to-human transmission.
Right. So on January 15th, Steve runs down the staircase from the war room from his place to the war room, and me and Greg Manns and Dan, we're in the war room, and he says, "Stop everything. We're starting a brand new show. I want to start it tomorrow." And he's like, and we're like, about what? He's like, about this coronavirus thing. And we're like, really? And what's your deal? He's like, listen, this coronavirus thing is going to be the biggest story in the world, and it's going to be the story for at least 2 years. He said, this is Steve back in January 15th of 2020 saying this is going to be the story for the next 2 years.
Steve Bannon War Room slogan, tomorrow's news today. Next 2 years news today.
Today, that's right. And so he said, we're going to do it about the coronavirus, and we're like, well, what are we going to call the show? And it's like, yeah, so I think somebody pops up and says war room epidemic, and I was like, no, that's not the actual official WHO word. The word is pandemic. And they're like, oh, yes, war room pandemic.
You are responsible for it being war.
Me and Raheem were both. Well, we got to share.
You're that Raheem?
We got to share the credit on that before he jumps down my throat. But yeah, we were that. I was the one that clarified that's actually the official term. And then Raheem's like, pandemic. That's the one. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and
then he said, "Yep, we're doing it." And then 10 days later, January 25th of 2020 is the first episode of War Room Pandemic. This is the first guy to ever report on it. First show ever about the coronavirus ever created at that point.
And they all call us conspiracy theorists while we were talking about...
Episode 3, we're talking about the lab leak.
Yeah.
Episode 3, I remember I think it was called China's Chernobyl. That's what we call it. That I named all the episodes. So I called it China's Chernobyl. And we're talking about the Wuhan lab leak then.
Excuse me.
Yeah. That we're talking about the lab leak then, and then 2 years. It's been 4 years, right? Yeah. These people still want to deny it. The mainstream media acts like actually it might have come from the.
Yeah, we never. I remember Morning Joe. We never said it wasn't possible. We never said it was that.
But you can't listen to Steve Bannon and Raheem Kassam if they say that that's true, right? Yeah. You have to wait till we say it. And in the meantime, people are dying. People are trying to figure out what the fuck's going on. People's lives have been lost. Their whole livelihoods, their careers, their businesses. And you're sitting here worried about whether or not people are going to listen to you for the truth or not. That's what makes the mainstream media sick.
I think that was a turning point in the American populace's belief and the credibility that they gave to mainstream media. They just lost it all.
Well, I mean, I think for the mainstream media is just done with they have zero credibility.
Yeah,
Zero credibility. Nobody listens to them anymore. They're trying their best to claw back their credibility, their integrity, but they don't see. Every human understands this. All right? It takes years and years to build up your integrity, build up your trust, right? But it takes seconds to lose it. And the media doesn't want to learn this lesson. right? They don't understand that. No, you guys messed up. You messed up so many times that your integrity and credibility is in the basement, and now it's going to take you years and years to build it back up. You're not going to get it overnight. You're not going to censor your way to it, right? Yes. You're not going to cancel your way to it. You're not going to debank your way. It'll never happen. And so they need to understand that they have a lot of work to do. And the first thing they need to do is be like, those guys, like Bannon, like Julian, they were all right and we were wrong and we're sorry. And until that happens, there is no giving quarter, right? Yeah. We're not gonna. Yeah. There's no. How about this? We win, they lose. Right? Now, how about that? Suck on that, right?
Yeah, it's brilliant. Just a quick reminder. This was January 29th, 25th, whenever it was the first episode of The War Room, and the mainstream media didn't report on it until March or April.
In March, I believe it was in March finally, I think after 40 episodes of Pandemic, might have been 44 episodes, if I remember right, it was finally called a pandemic by the WHO. So it's 44 episodes in from January 25th. Consider an episode a day, 5 days a week. It's like somewhere in March.
Mainstream media was 44 days late on reporting on what they said was the biggest thing that happened in one of the biggest things that happened in American history. It killed millions of people.
And they were late to a bunch of guys in Steve Bannon's basement with a couple of laptops and some phones, right?
It makes you think about what they're really saying, where they're so concerned about saving people's lives, or they're concerned about this. They're more concerned about profits and different things that they were doing.
Actually, it's even worse. What they're concerned about is their position on the primacy of information distribution. What that means is that they always get to be first, right? Nobody's going to believe this story until Washington Post says it's true.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's what they hate. They don't want us to be the guys that get all the good news first and then get the credibility off that too. Because then it's like, why would I go to Washington Post? These guys get it before Washington Post does. And then what does Washington Post do? Right? They can only hire you or get rid of you. Right? Yes, and that's the problem. They're not going to hire you because you don't believe the same things that they do, and so they have to get rid of you. That's what the answer becomes.
That's incredible. And another thing that was a huge thing that happened while you were there, I remember seeing videos of Vish Burra. He was dangling a little hard drive. He was like, "We got this." The hard drive from hell. I know there's probably a lot of stories that you can tell about that and go into it, but I know you were there. Can you talk about what that was like and things that you went through and what something that you would want to say on that?
Well, I mean, look, I working in the war room. Is the first time I realized how close I am to sort of the crazy powers that be and the crazy demonic forces that are trying to take you out. Yeah. Right. And so, that's where I had those experiences where I was chased around by the FBI while we were trying to keep Dr. Lehman Yan safe. Yeah. Right? I was tailed by the FBI while I was trying to.
No way.
That's a real story. Trailed by the FBI. And then like with the Hunter Biden laptop.
It's the hard drive from hell. That's what we're asking about. The hard drive from hell is the Hunter Biden laptop story.
Right. The hard drive from hell. Now that was, look, working on that was the honor of my life, and I knew it was going to be big. We all knew it was going to be big but when we were doing it.
And he's worked on Pandemic and building the New York Republican clubs. And he's saying this about the hard drive from hell.
Yeah, we knew it was going to be one of the biggest things ever, right? In the history of the world. Based on what we saw, largest political scandal in American history ever. And so what I was thinking, though, was, the story is going to be great. I have to believe that there's going to be a real effect that the story is going to have. But seeing the reaction from the national security apparatus, the big tech apparatus, the media apparatus, all working together to crush the story, that was like the real learning moment for me about how much danger we are in as a country and how much danger we're in as individual citizens if we don't come together and work together to fight against this. Because once the CIA and the FBI and NSA get involved and then control your media organizations and say, call it disinformation, control your tech organizations and say, censor it, cancel it, delete it, right? Who holds the NSA, CIA accountable? This is the deep state, right? And then when we try to send Trump in to rein them in, they actually end up, putting the putting the knife to him and trying to get him out, and which they kind of successfully did when they stole the election in 2020.
So, so that was for you. I mean, that was one of the biggest things. Like, you didn't expect this kind of response from the national security apparatus.
I did not expect the scale and the speed, right, and the sort of the overwhelming sort of response, like the thorough, holistic response that they deployed. I couldn't write that in a book. No, there's no way that quick.
Yeah,
right. That powerful, right? That's the kind of power that Stalin and Mao wished they had, right? And today, it's Gerber's baby eating food like Joe Biden, who's in control of that apparatus, and Susan Rice and the Barack Obamas of the world. These are the people who control this crazy power now, right? And so now you have to decide, are you just going to let these soy boys and these men with weak souls run your government, or are you going to step up, be a real man, be a patriot, be an American, and go take control of your government to keep these forces in check? Remember, the saying is, you get what you vote for.
Yeah.
And so if you don't vote, you're stuck with what you're left with. And if you do vote, you hope your guy is going to win, right? But what you can't. But if you do nothing, you leave all those spaces to the worst people in the world, and you end up being governed by the worst people in the world.
It sounds like you're saying courage is the most important virtue, because upon courage, it is all the other virtues lie.
You listen to a lot of words.
Hey, I said I was part of the posse, man. I'm part of the posse.
Part of the posse.
I am a huge fan, and I think that what you're saying is it's just you need to be a force multiplier. You need to be active and involved and speak out. It's if we don't speak out, if we don't it's another message I think I'm getting from what you're saying, is that if we just bury our heads in the sand, if we just be sunshine patriots and go play golf and just want to get just don't want to deal with it, they're just going to continue having the power. That's what they want us to do.
Right.
They don't want us to be engaged. They don't want us to speak out, and if we're afraid of it.
Absolutely.
And so I know you're being great.
I'm getting a phone call. Don't worry.
This has just been so incredible. And so so they encourage people. Have courage to speak. Don't be afraid.
Be not afraid, as my friend Jack Maxey would say. Be not afraid. You have to fight. You have to have courage. You have to have willpower. The difference between a lot of what you and your enemy end up accomplishing is willpower, right? If you have more willpower than your enemy, you will win. Right? There's a lot, you could have less money, you could have less strength, you could have you could be down in all these sort of aspects or parameters, depending on what the fight is. But if the willpower, the strength to fight, the will to do it is there, you can win. I've seen men do crazy things just by wanting it way more than the fucking guy across from them.
The grit, determination, and cussedness of the American.
Exactly.
Vish Burra, where does this come from for you in your life?
My willpower?
Or your desire?
Look, man, I'm a child of immigrants. My father came here to this country in '79. Married my mother in '89, brought her here, and my father was somebody who was kind of supposed to be a nobody back where he was from in India, and he comes to America and then has two beautiful kids, me being one of them. Raises us in a beautiful home in Staten Island that he owns, right? That he worked towards, and I'm sitting there thinking, man, imagine if I'm 25 years old, I leave to a strange country, and I'm told, build a family here. Would I be able to do it? I don't know, because I'll never have that opportunity. But I know my father did it, and he did it so well that I'm here right now. And so it's all for me. It's man, I want to live up to be the great man that my father is, and how he was able to build this beautiful thing in a strange land. And I hope that I can do that too in this, which is now my homeland, right? And that's why I hope to be as great as him in a place that I just call home, right? Because for him, it wasn't home until he made it his home here.
Sounds like we owe just as much to those who came before us as we do to those who come after us.
Oh yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I'm not here in a vacuum. me being here is the reason why I'm here is because of everybody who came before me and did everything that they did so that I could be here. How would I look if I forsake that or gave that up for nothing? You know, and that would not sit well with me. I'm a representative of not just my past, but also my future. And so I have to work really, really hard to make sure that I keep everybody who came before me proud, and everyone who comes after me with that same pride. You know?
You're talking about how hard you work. And, you know, I've read the articles. I think it was Washington Post or Politico that did this special on you, and I read that too. And you know, okay, cool, all right. And I was just going to say that one of the things that they were, I saw that you have been involved in a lot of other projects. You worked for congressmen. You've been, you know, leading a lot of different offices and congressional offices. What's your next project for Vish Burra?
I think mostly now I'll be consulting. I've built a reputation to this point where, you know, whatever I kind of put my hands on turns to gold. So I would like, you know, now it's more about wherever nonprofits I can help, you know, consulting, getting them out of the ground, MAGA nonprofits, help with that. A lot of PR stuff, media, podcasts, help with that, events and all that. And then there's still, you know, races where candidates I help consult with, and there's, you know, a couple sitting Congress members that I also consult for. So look, you know, I'm advising, I'm being a brain, being
good brain.
I'm being a face. I'm using my hands, my body, my legs, everything I can contribute to this movement in any way that I can is what I offer. And I'm more than proven in that space at this point where, you know, people know that, like, I'm willing to do whatever it takes for MAGA, for our country, you know?
Providential that you'd be here. Doing this work, a man who's doing a lot of work for the MAGA movement and for his country, for America. And where can people find you?
I'm mostly on X. Find me at Vish Burra, VishBurra. Find me on Getter at Vish Burra. Find me on Truth Social at Vish. And yeah, those are really my main three. Those are my main three platforms.
Thank you for giving such. Thank you for giving so much time for a big Roman Posse member. It's a huge thing, man. Can't thank you enough.
I just want to say, look, the reason why we did our podcast is to inspire guys like you to do that, to do your own. You're the force multiplier now. Your audience is the force multiplier now, and I couldn't be prouder of the work I did then, because you might not be here today, and because you're here today, I know that I did something. You know, and thank you. Brother. It's my honor to be interviewed by you.
You're the best, man. Thank you so much, Vish.